You have to think back as to what it was like in the late 80s. HIV and AIDS were frequently not even separated in people's minds. It was just the people were dying and it was the gay disease.
There was an epidemic that was impacting the community, the gay community that I was a part of at that time. We all knew of people who were falling sick. You would see them out and about looking unwell, and then you would hear that they had died, sometimes very quickly. And there was a lot of fear in the community, a lot of uncertainty, and I think a lot of misinformation that when I think back to that time.
I remember back in the early 90s when I first started at the clinic, it was not uncommon for our program to have 50 or more people die per year, and it was devastating, absolutely devastating.
It had reached a point where you didn't, if you hadn't seen a friend of yours, you didn't ask anymore. If you bumped into somebody you knew, you didn't ask where they were because you didn't want to hear the answer. So when they were in front of you, you were really happy to see them, but when they weren't in front of you, you didn't know what was going on.
I wasn't living in London in the early days. I actually lived in Toronto, and I moved to London in 88, 89, and then I went back to Toronto in 94 for a meeting, and all my friends were gone. The bar that I worked at was still there, but I didn't recognize a soul in it. Everybody was gone.
The community at the time was very judgmental of the disease, and there was so much stigma attached. If you did have this HTLV3 diagnosis, you were a slut, you know, you were living promiscuously, you were a leper, you were not to be supported, but it was all fear-based and ignorance-based. And that came from everybody. It came from within the gay community, and it came from without the gay community. So it was everywhere. So there was really nowhere to turn.
So there was a lot of rumor and conjecture and fear going around. And I think that what people saw, what people responded to, in my recollection, is friends falling ill and not receiving very good treatment, not being able to look after themselves. And there was a collective response of how do we help each other, because any one of us could have found ourselves in that situation at that time.
Thankfully, these people came together and really spearheaded what became the AIDS Committee of London, and then of course RHAC and John Gordon Home, of course, right? So it came from a place of necessity, desperation, need, community, sadness, really a lot of sadness. There was a hopelessness at the time. So that's really why it started back 1982, 83, I think.
It was the beginning of the AIDS community, like many AIDS communities across the country, across the nation, I would think, were started because of the need of, there were people who were dying. And these people were horribly discriminated against and stigmatized, and needed to have their own space, their own Canadian Cancer Society, if you will. There wasn't anything for people with HIV in the early days.
And we got together because we needed to sort of create a community of people who were interested in finding out more about the disease, to create resources for people to actually be able to access something, and to try to create a climate where people who were suffering at the time, because there was no good end in sight, you know, there wasn't a lot of hope. And so people were really desperately trying to find ways to cope and live. It was almost like an adventure. Guys, let's get together, let's see what we can do, let's see if we can even begin to scratch the surface of answering some of these questions for the needs within our community, because it was becoming more and more obvious that we needed a place for people to centralize, to be able to go for support services. It was clearly targeted towards support services. How are we going to support the people who need to be supported?
The transition from ACOL to RHAC, and that's as nice as I'm going to be able to say it, was a necessary step. We were expanding. We had regions that we had to take care of that no longer boasted their own AIDS committee. So our reach became far-reaching. So we became the regional HIV/AIDS connection. And the connection part, that word to me spoke volumes as to just what we do in the HIV client services when it comes to taking care of clients. If we can't do it, we will connect with somebody who can do it.
I'd say what was the underpinning here in London was the passion of Dr. Ian Mackey. He was a physician at St. Joseph's Hospital, and he was seeing people living with HIV and AIDS back at the beginning of the epidemic. And his little office space just didn't work anymore. And he realized, I need to do something more, because the numbers are coming in, people are coming in, I need to be able to help them, I need a team.
Betty Ann Thomas was the Carol Burnett, if you will, of a person in that office. She was funny, she was strong. She got things done, she made differences. There was Clarence Crossman, who was also one of the founding members of the AIDS Committee. And Clarence was peace and tranquility and calmness and goodness. There's David Brownstone, who was our safer sex educator back then, who taught us all how to put condoms on our head and blow them up. The early days of that agency was a family that worked together.
We were really seeing like the efforts of the home visiting teams from the AIDS Committee of London were doing absolutely wonderful work, but it was recognized that it was beyond what they could be doing, and the numbers were growing. So they began to say, we need something like what's in Toronto, Casey House. We need one of those here in London.
And then even the effort that went into opening the John Gordon Home in its original location at 414 Dufferin Ave was an incredible community effort. It was like a barn raising almost. The house was leased, and then it was gutted and redecorated, and it was turned into just a beautiful, beautiful home-like environment. It was an incredible effort to be a part of. And there was so many people that had so many skills that contributed them for months, going to work every day, and then in the evenings working, renovating to get this place ready. It was an incredible effort. And then it opened in October of 1992. The first patient arrived at the John Gordon Home.
You walked in the home and you thought, this home is filled with heart. The love you felt, the care, the compassion of the staff who were working there. And Tuesdays, June made the whole place just smell of her pot roast or her stew or whatever she was making. It was just wonderful. And that to me just really exemplified a home with heart. You give someone shelter, you give someone good food, you give someone compassionate care, and it makes all the difference.
People who are affected / infected / living with, the makeup hasn't changed. There's still family. There's still moms who worry about their sons or daughters who are living in the John Gordon Home, and if they're going to get well, and if they're going to get well, what that wellness looks like for them. There's a lot of hope in the John Gordon Home today, because people don't go there to die, people go there to live again. And that's what makes the difference in how that home has evolved over the years.
Well, since John Gordon Home opened its doors in October of 1992, the lights have never gone out. There has been an incredible team of staff and volunteers that have kept the place running for 23 years now and well into the future. And they create an atmosphere that is home-like, where people feel safe, where people feel respected, that they have a sense of dignity, and they get to experience an environment that many people may have never had before in their lives, that is essential to getting well. And I'm so proud of the people who work and volunteer, contribute their time at John Gordon Home. It's really what makes it a special place.